here. So, moving on. I read an article recently of a man we're going to call Maynard. Well, that was his name. It's not I'm calling him. That's what his name and the thing was. And he managed a very large Jewish cemetery in Chicago. And he told the following story. He was being interviewed about what's it like managing a Jewish cemetery. And he said that quite surprisingly, that the largest number of visitors who come to the cemetery on any one day come on Father's Day. Not on Mother's Day, but on Father's Day. Over 1,000 people visit the cemetery that day. Well, why would that be? And the reason he gave was that because more mothers and wives come to visit than do fathers and husbands. It's just the way it is. And so he tells the story that one day he was in his office, late afternoon on Father's Day, when one of the crew comes running in, screaming, "There's a fire in Section 9. He ran out, he got into his golf cart, and he's going over there, and he's driving towards the area, and as he got closer, he saw the smoke was coming from the area. But as he got closer, there was a man sitting on the ground by the side of a grave with a portable hibachi, coals lit and burning. Well, Maynard arrived there very angry, and he thought to himself, how can you desecrate a cemetery like this? How can you be cooking on the grounds of a grave? And he jumped out the golf cart and he runs over there and he begins to sort of shout out, you can't. When the fellow looked up and said, excuse me, let me just explain. Every year on Father's Day, my dad and I would get together, we'd put on the barbecue, and we'd eat hot dogs together. This is the first Father's Day since he died. I just wanted to come and barbecue one hot dog and eat it here with him. Well, you can imagine that all the sort of anger completely dripped out of Maynard, and he felt a bit embarrassed. He said, okay, no problem, just be careful. Make sure that the fire doesn't fall onto the grass and burn the grass, and please clean up after yourself. The person said, I fully intend to do so, don't worry about it. Later that day, there was no sign at the grave that anyone had ever been there, let alone barbecued a hot dog. And every year since, Maynard looks forward to that man returning to the grave. He comes late in the afternoon when most people have already left, brings out his little hibachi, and he sits down and he eats his barbecued hot dog. So, why do I tell you this story? Because for that man, the barbecued hot dog was his Yizkor. It was his way of saying Yizkor. Now take that man. He sits alone by the grave of his father, eating a hot dog and remembering the times they shared. They shared many Father's Day barbecues together. But tell me, he recalled one of those days. When we recall one of our memories and shared experience with loved ones, what images of them go through our minds? For instance, is it an image and a memory of a more recent event? Or is it an image of one further back in time? And let me tell you why I ask this question and how we should maybe answer it. In the prophet Ezekiel's very famous vision of the dry bones, which we read the Haftarah, we read in this past Shabbat, Ezekiel prophesies of a time when the resurrection of the dead will take place, and the bones of those who have passed away will rise up from the graves and live again. I remember many years ago when I was at JTS, I asked Professor Siegel in a class when we were discussing this. And I said to him, when the resurrection of the dead happens, how will they come back? What will we look like and be like? Will we come back the way we were on the last day of our lives? Will we come back as children and get to live our lives and grow older again? Or will we be resurrected in the prime of our lives, young and healthy, and never age from there on? Needless to say, he couldn't answer the question. It wasn't supposed to be an answer, it was just one I was pondering. That is the same question we ask those we gather here to remember today. Do we remember them as they were later in life, when age and illness have taken their toll? Or do we remember them when they were younger, in the prime of their lives? Whether from our own memory banks or from pictures that we've seen. I don't know if there's an answer, but I'm just sort of throwing it out there. As you think about this question, I am reminded of an article I read some years ago. I don't know if you remember, there was a whole debate here in Canada as the late Queen Elizabeth was aging. So there was this whole question, should an updated picture be put on the money and the stamps, or should we leave it the way she was, younger? And there was a very similar question when the United States Postal Service announced the release of a new stamp in honor of Elvis Presley. The Postal Service couldn't decide what image of Elvis should be put on the stamp. Should they use a picture of the young, hip Elvis, or perhaps the picture should be of an older Elvis? And the Postal Service couldn't decide what to do. So they decided what they're going to do very, very democratically. They're going to actually hold a vote. They took a vote. Specifically, they held an election and let the American people decide for themselves which image of Elvis they prefer on the stamp. Would you believe that more than 1 million people voted? Finally, the great hoopla, the Postmaster General went to Memphis, Tennessee, and he announced the results. There was a lot of tension in the room when he finally announced that by a vote of 764,321 to 439,214, the American people had spoken. The picture of Elvis Presley as a young man had won out over the picture of Elvis in his later years. And that would be the stamp that would be released. Now, why do I tell you this story, and what does it really have to do with Yizkor? Well, there was one woman there in Memphis at the time who was interviewed by the reporters. And she said that she was unable to decide which of the two pictures of Elvis she wanted on the stamp. So what did she do? She cast 400 ballots. That's real democracy, right? 400 ballots. 200 for the first picture and 200 for the second picture, in the hope that the post office would print them both. Sounds a bit strange, but think about it. For whatever reason, this was something that she obviously cared a great deal about. And so the choice was not easy. And now think about this woman's choice in terms of what we are confronted with today at Yizkor. And we sit here. We too are confronted with a choice that we care about and a choice we don't want to make. And that is, how do we choose to remember our loved ones? Every time we remember them, every time we say Yizkor, images of them will form in our minds. And then we feel like we must choose. We must choose which image, which picture of our loved ones we're going to use. We will remember them as they were younger, as they were when they were old, as they were when they were in their prime, or as they were in their decline. But the truth is that we actually don't have to make that choice at all. The beauty of Yizkor, The message days like us on our calendar are designed to teach us. Unlike the Elvis postage stamp or even Ezekiel's vision, we are not limited to just one image, just one day. Instead, we use a kaleidoscope of memories and images to keep our loved ones alive within us. The images of our loved ones from a scrapbook, a slideshow, hopefully plays on a loop repeatedly in our minds and in our hearts all year round, depending on what we might be thinking about at any time, any given moment, including today, will determine which image of them we bring up at any moment. Do we want to visualize celebrating at a simcha, or do we want to recall a sadder moment? Yizkor holds a very special place in the Jewish calendar. It's a fixed way of recalling our loved ones, but it's not just one fixed image for them that we need to have. And that is because whether we choose to remember them as they were when they were young or old, happy or sad, or in good times or in bad times, doesn't really matter. What does matter is that we continue to remember them, that we continue to have these images in our minds, in our hearts, and that we let our memories of them continue to shape the rest of our lives. And since I began with the story of a cemetery, I'm going to conclude with one. No spoilers in this, I promise you. But in the next to last scene of season 3 of Shtisel, anybody here watch Shtisel? Yeah, I thought so. I'm not going to spoil it, I promise you. Reb Shulam relates a teaching by the Yiddish author Isaac Bashevis Singer from the novel Shosha, that all of us are indeed walking graveyards. Why? Because we carry within us all those souls whom we remember, not just today, but every day. And Yizkor comes to reinforce for us the truth that the dead are not gone, but they are always with us, in word and in deed. And as the camera in our mind pans back in time over the years, we see and we hear them once again. And as we recite Yizkor this morning, let us recall those images, those words, those memories, and may we be privileged to keep those memories and images alive for many more years to come. May the souls of our loved ones whom we remember today be remembered for a blessing as they continue to inspire us and as we move forward in our lives. May their souls be bound up in the bond of life eternal. Amen. Please